the Writing Community Chat Show Advent Christmas Calendar.
So that out. Can you talk amongst yourselves for a minute? I'll just check he's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
no problem.
Please forgive me. Hang on 1 second. Right
Yeah,
Love it. I mean, for a start, guys, this is great having a little stop and think, thought time. But to be inventing the BBC Writers' Room and leading that in a time where, soap opera, which is incredible right now, it's in everyone's life. They rely on it every single day. And to be in that bloom and to create that and then take charge and decide that people are not doing what they're supposed to and going to teach them that is incredible.
yeah. I mean, he kind of sets it up as like the Charles Xavier Academy of not X-Men but writers. That's how I imagine it to be.
I'm so sorry. I just left you to improvise.
No, we just Chris just explained how you were like Charles Xavier.
Yeah, with loads of writers.
Slightly. Thank you. That's very flattering.
Yeah. So, John, when you started it, what were you looking for in a writer? Because obviously, you sort of knew you had the idea of growing your own and sort of helping bring on board a load of people that could help write with the BBC and work with you. But what would you look for in that initial spark of that person? Because obviously, you could teach them an awful lot, but what was you looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I worked out quite quickly that you can teach them structure, but teaching them a voice is a lot harder. So I think you'd read scripts, and it didn't matter if the story wasn't great or the structure wasn't great. What you were looking for was just a line of dialogue or an image that made you go, "Wow, that's really special or interesting." Also, then it was authenticity was a big thing for me. One of the problems I felt with the soaps was they were becoming, they'd lost touch with their roots, and so I really wanted people who knew that world. So that was a big deal for me as well. Is finding authenticity, because otherwise they become terribly patronizing, and you start telling other people how to live a bit. So it was a combination of that and just it's just to have an interesting take on the world. But what's interesting, if I look back now at all the writers who've been through it, and it's nearly 100 now, the two defining things is they're always really smart. They're very, very bright. Not necessarily university educated, but very bright. And also the sad truth is that most of them, they'll hate me for saying this, is they're quite damaged. There's a reason why they write. They need to write to make the world safe.
So how did you take those brilliant and amazing, unique individuals and then get them to work in what is essentially a big team?
Well, what you needed people who wanted to do it. That was the thing, and loved it, and could love it. And then really you just kind of stick them in a pressure cooker environment and bash away until you either sink or swim, basically. I mean, there's a degree of fear involved because if it doesn't work, we'll part company. That's not me being vicious. That's just reality.
If it doesn't work.
Exactly. But there's a degree of aspiration here for them. The great thing, and I still think the great thing about working on soaps and continuing drama was, if you do this, you'll see your work on air, and you'll see how good you are, and that's it's a wonderful thing. But it's easy to forget how exciting it is to see your work on television.
Were there any circumstances where you had tried and tested these theories, obviously, and got the instant reaction off air, and it had gone sort of not the way you wanted it to go? And how did you approach that and deal with that when, as you said, you were trying to build that trust in people that this would work?
Well, see, that's a really good question. What was interesting was, if I look back now, the very first course I taught, I didn't know what I was doing. I knew kind of what an inciting incident was, and I knew the character had to have a desire. But beyond that, it was, I was bullshitting, really. I was reading. I had Robert McKee under my desk, and I was paraphrasing it. And I didn't understand mid-points, I didn't understand crisis points. There was so much I had to learn. What's interesting is even now, that course are the most successful group of writers I've ever produced.
Wow.
And I think that tells you everything about structure, which is it comes from within. you know, and that was a really big revelation to me. It's not something imposed by Sid Field, you know, or Blake Snyder. Great as those things are, it's actually intrinsic. It's innate. You know, we've been telling stories like this since the very beginning, and if you give people enough room to practice, and importantly, give them the financial stability to do that for a year, so they don't have to worry about a job. You know, they can fail, get back on the horse. That starts to come out. The voice starts to come out, and you see that. And that was the amazing thing for me was, it was very quickly evolved from you need to follow these patterns to you need to hear that voice telling you this is the pattern stories form. And then I was hugely relieved to see, like, you know, because at that time I was working with a lot of writers who were very anti-structure, like people like Russell T Davies and Jimmy McGovern and Tony Jordan. You know, it's all rubbish, and like, stop reading that crap. And you know, and they were lovely and brilliant. But what was lovely was I was able to read their scripts and go, yeah, but you know, your scripts are perfectly structured. Yeah. You know, and the big thing for me was actually Alan Plater, the late Alan Plater, who for years had railed against structure. You know, his proudest moment of his entire life was punching Sid Field in the face. And he came and gave a talk, and the student said, so, because by this time he was quite late on in his life, and the student said, how do you write Midsummer Murders? And he said, well, you know, the thing is, he said, the murder is always just before the first commercial break, and then just before the last commercial break, all hope is lost and somebody really close to your central character dies. And I was going, Alan, that's structure. Like, and it just is, you know, and it's just that's the thing for me is it's a marvelous, miraculous thing that is born of the human mind. And once you get that, it's sort of